Welcome to Vlogmas! I'm Teacher Nikki and I make videos for all online ESL teachers. And today I'm talking about something that's touching to me, that I kind of get a little bit triggered when I hear comments or see comments about non-native English speakers who are teachers. And there's comments about oftentimes their grammar or whether or not they should even be allowed to teach English as a second language to other people or English speakers of other languages. So there's a lot of reasons that I'm going to share with you about why I think that they are competent teachers and that they can help other people learn English as well. And one of the companies that does hire non-native English speakers is iTutorGroup. This is not a plug of any kind, but this is the reason I'm telling you this is because that's some of the reason where I hear comments is about certain companies that hire non-native English speakers, and then there's just issues. I don't know, people just make me a little bit mad about it. So anyway, let me make sure that this is up. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about some personal experience, but then also just observations that I've made. So one of the biggest observations that I have made, and I'm a second language learner, not of English, but Spanish. So I'm speaking from a perspective of learning a second language, and I've had both native speakers and non-native speakers teach me Spanish. So as someone who has learned a second language and has had both non-native speakers and native speakers teach me, I've seen the benefit in both people. First of all, in my high school experience, I grew up in a small suburb outside of Chicago, and all of my Spanish teachers in high school were non-native Spanish speakers. And if I didn't have those teachers, I wouldn't have been inspired to learn Spanish. Granted, I had visited Mexico many times, and that was the original inspiration for learning Spanish. But if I hadn't had my teachers in high school, they wouldn't have lit that fire even more, and I wouldn't have majored in Spanish in university and gotten my bachelor's in Spanish. So, or at least I doubt that I would, or the fire might not have been as strong to guide me in that direction. So my point in sharing that is, just because somebody is a non-native speaker doesn't mean they can't inspire a student. We need to look at the big picture, that yes, we do have a lot of native speakers who can help non-native English speakers learn English, but there are also competent teachers who speak English as a second or third language. They're not native speakers, and they can inspire those students just as much, if not more. They might be able to relate to them because they've been through the process of learning English in a different way than we have. We don't have the perspective of what it's like to learn English as a second language or a third language or whatever it might be. So you have to take that into consideration as well. Another thing I want you to consider is, what is an effective teacher? Is an effective teacher just knowing the content? Or are there other things involved, such as inspiring your student, encouraging your student, leveling with your student, making them excited about the subject that they're learning? Just knowing the content isn't what makes you an effective teacher. It's making sure that you can relate to the student, that you can inspire them, that you're patient with them. So please look at that as well, if you're one of those people who thinks that non-native speakers shouldn't teach another language. Another thing I want you to consider is, when you become fluent in another language, does that mean that you speak it perfectly? Also consider the leaders that speak English as a second language. When you hear people from other countries that learned English and they're fluent, are they still making mistakes? And are you expecting that every single person that you're teaching is going to be free of errors? The reason that I'm bringing this up is because typically when you learn a second language, you're still going to make mistakes, grammatical errors, because your first language interferes with it. There's not much you can do to change that, especially because your mind kind of cements, your brain as it becomes cemented in that other language or your first language, and that's why it's constantly interfering with making errors when you're speaking another language. That doesn't mean that you can be really, really good or that you can never speak without errors. I mean, you can get almost like a native speaker. However, if you're not immersed in the language, it's a lot harder. So even though a native speaker could be teaching a student, if they're never immersed, it's highly unlikely that they are going to be speaking like a native speaker. It's just not as likely. So it's like, if you have a non-native speaker teaching them, and the reason you're worried about it is for pronunciation or errors or whatever it may be, my point is that it's unlikely that that's going to make or break the student. Even if the non-native speaker teaching them is giving them misinformation about English, number one, that's not going to be their only teacher that they have forever and ever. They're going to see a lot of different teachers throughout their time. So throughout their time learning English. And if they make an error or if they mispronounce something, it's not going to make or break their English. So it's just like, people are so rude or mean about this, and it's like, it's just not the end of the world. Insert clip right now. So I'm watching the editing and I just want to clarify something. The beginning stages of learning a language, it's really, really important to have correct grammar and pronunciation and vocabulary and all of that stuff. So I'm definitely referring more to online teaching. I know that, for example, in dual language, when you have kindergarten, first grade, and so on, that it's really, really important at those early stages to have accurate language when you're teaching a second language to someone. So it's not that I'm discounting accuracy at all, but when it comes to online education and the people who are available to teach those students, you have to take into consideration the fact that look at what options are available and the big picture, just always keeping that big picture in mind. But even still, with dual language, and especially where I live, there's not a ton of native speakers available for the Spanish and English immersion programs when it's Spanish related. So I'm a non-native speaker teaching Spanish to kids, but I taught mostly middle school. I did teach first grade 1 year, and in that first grade environment, I remember my boss saying, it's good that you speak Spanish really well because it's really important at these early stages for them to have someone who speaks accurately. So definitely looking at age range and things like that does matter. So I feel I'm going on and on, but it's like I'm more of I have a balanced perspective. My main point with this is, don't just discount a teacher based on them being non-native. Don't just like say this person can't teach, because even me, I do still make mistakes in Spanish. And so that person, my boss that complimented me, he still complimented me despite the fact that I'm sure I made a few errors here and there, and my accent's definitely not like a native speaker. And my middle school students told me that, so but they still respected me because of how I worked with them as a teacher, because I was one of those teachers that really, really cared about their success. So that's why I have this perspective as well, as a Spanish teacher who's not a native Spanish speaker, and I still made a very positive impact on my students. At least I hope so. But no, I've had feedback from students, and just based on the connection you have with the kids, if you're making an impact or not. So I'm just looking at things from those perspectives, and I want other people to see it, how and why I think the way I do, because there's a little bit of a stigma on the non-native language teachers. So anyway, let's move forward with the video. You'll hear me go on about this, I'm sure, again. And people aren't being open-minded about, they're not seeing both sides, that this could also be a positive for them. So I just want you to consider that non-native English speakers are legit. They are also able to teach English very well, and if they're making an error, pronunciation-wise, grammar-wise, whatever it may be, in the long run, the student, if they're determined to learn English, they're still going to learn it. And guess what? They're still, the student, whether they have a native speaker or a non-native speaker, they're still going to make errors sometimes when they speak. But the big picture is, are they able to speak, communicate, write, read, listen, etc.? Are they able to become fluent? And with the practice, whether they have a non-native English speaker or a regular native, not regular, whether they have a non-native English speaker as a teacher or a native English speaker as a teacher, is not going to make or break their success. So that's it, you guys. I kind of want to still tell another story, because I told you guys that I had native Spanish speakers as my teachers and non-native, and to be honest, I always enjoyed the non-native Spanish speakers. Like, I connected with them more. I don't know, and that's like, I don't want to bash native teachers either, like native speaker teachers either. It's just that those were the teachers that happened to make an impact on me. So again, my point is that it's the impact that the teacher is making. It's not always about the content and being a perfect, competent teacher. You do need to be competent, but it's just, that's not the number one thing. That's not going to make or break a student. So I think I'm done with my rant. How long was this video? Oh, it's 10 minutes, not too bad. Okay, so this is Vlogmas. I'm just going to be here talking about different things that interest me for during this Christmas period, and happy holidays if you don't celebrate Christmas. Happy to you, whatever it is that you celebrate. And if you don't celebrate anything, I hope you still enjoyed this video. That's why I'm just talking about different things that interest me related to English and teaching English and all of that fun stuff. So if you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. If you have ideas for what you want to hear during Vlogmas, let me know in the comments. Or if you have ideas for other future videos, definitely leave that in the comments too. See you next time. Bye!